Hello, I'm Susan Ryan from Elm Street Books. Thank you for coming today. This is a nice crowd. I'd like to thank the New Canaan Library for letting us have these events here. They are always well attended, and the town gets a big kick out of them. I know you all know Mika and Joe, and there's no need for me to introduce them particularly. If you don't know them, you don't have a TV. But I wanted to say one thing about this book. I've read all three books, of course, I'm in a bookstore, but a pattern begins to develop here with Mika. And I think it's very enticing. And if you haven't read this book, of all the books she's written, this is the one you want to read. She is so honest about the fact that it's not easy to do what she does. Her first book was growing up in a family that was really smart, and I mean, she didn't feel totally good about it. Her second book was Knowing Your Value. How much are you worth as a woman? Joe has helped out with that a lot. This one, Obsessed. Oh, wait a minute. That didn't. I meant that as a compliment to Mika. But, you know, if you compare Mika's book to Sheryl Sandberg's book, Mika's is a much more real book about how you decide what you're worth as a woman. It's very enticing, too. This one, Obsessed, is a very different topic. It's about weight and your mindset. And her good friend Diane Smith is here, who is a Connecticut television personality for 25 years. And they had a very different approach to the weight problem. Diane has lost 80 pounds. Think of that. And Mika has gained, her weight wasn't losing. It was the way she thought about her weight. And you read the book and you'll see, and they'll talk about it, I'm sure. But I thought, I've been to one of their events before, and I thought one of the most interesting things they said, and so many people are interested in weight loss, and you think about why so many people in this country are obese these days, and Mika talks about it on Morning Joe all the time, is that people eat what's easy. Think about if you go through a drive-through or you have food sent in, it's usually not healthy food, but it's easy. You have to work at this to control your weight. I'm sure Diane will talk about that. So here they are, Mika and Joe, and Diane will be here too.
Hello. Great to be here.
It is great to be here. You know, every time we come here, I live here, but every time I try to do a book event here, there's either a typhoon or a snowstorm. This is just like Morning Joe. My mic works and hers doesn't. So I'm in Congress and I'm staring down Newt Gingrich, okay?
Test.
Okay, I got mine. Is it
Then
working?
I say Newt. I hear, why don't we switch? That's loud.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Seriously, the first book event, it was a monsoon.
Right,
There was
right.
one that was canceled from a snowstorm. And now
Snowstorm,
look at this. So
and now
thank you
this.
all for coming in the rain. That's
And I had
amazing.
no idea where this place was, our first book tour, and now it is home. Just one quick pointer, okay? When I wave hi and I'm driving past, it's okay to wave hi back.
Oh, in New Canaan, they don't
That's
do
just
that,
no, it's
do
a
they?
Southern thing. No, we're freaks. You know, in the South, we just wave all the time. You know, just wave. You know, I keep waving. You know, and finally, after being
a
up here
little
for about
needy.
3 weeks, it is needy.
Yeah.
Susan says, "Just stop. They're not going to wave back. You're not in like the redneck Riviera anymore. I got to wave there. Thank you, sir. Thank you. One in the back. Thank you, sir. Thank you there. All right, very good." All right, so Mika, this is an incredible book, and Diane has lost 80 pounds. You've gained like 15, I think. I have, it has no correlation to this. I've picked up about 35. So tell us, why did you write this book?
Well, it started with, I've been wanting to tell my part of the story for quite some time because I always felt like I was sort of living a lie on the air. And even in my own personal life. But the book was inspired by a very tough, raw conversation that I had with Diane on a boat with our families, scurried up at the front, afraid as to what was going on in the back.
Hold that thought.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm going to be a director.
And hers too. So what happened was we talked for the first time about the one thing that divided us. And we've been friends for over 15 years. We've shared everything together. Gossip, personal relationships, helping me raise my kids, whatever.
You had a baby together.
We had a baby together. I don't know if you know that about me, but when my second child was born, Jim was at an investigative reporters conference and couldn't make the plane home. But Diane, I said, just in case the baby comes a little early, could you be there? And I actually didn't even ask her. I asked Tom, her husband, at the coffee shop down the street, asked if maybe Diane would be available for when the baby comes, if I needed.
And she ended up catching your baby.
Yeah, the doctor went to get pizza. And so it was awkward, but let's just say we have shared literally everything. And yet, we couldn't talk about this one thing that had been happening over the course of more than a decade of being friends, and that is that Diane had gained over 100 pounds, and I was always very skinny and never really told her how and why.
So we've had quite a few book events. The one thing we haven't said, though, is, over that time, Diane gained, how much? I want to get this right,
Like 100 pounds.
Like 100 pounds. You actually had lost, even since you started Morning Joe, you had kind of turned it into overdrive, and you were down to a weight that you later discovered was unhealthy. You were like 118,
About
right?
118. So we had this really awkward, tough conversation. And it's the kind of conversation that I think could end a friendship. But to me, I think...
No, come on. You come on. Why would you say that? What in the world did you tell her that would end a friendship, Mika?
I wanted to know what was behind.
Diane,
I
here,
told
let's
her,
cut through this.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to kill Hamlet in the first act. What did Mika tell you?
She said, "You're fat."
Okay, very good. Go ahead and continue, Mika.
I also used the word obese, and it was tough. I wanted to know why, and I wanted to know why we couldn't talk about it.
This is a
And-
Brzezinski thing, by the way.
Well, this is true. My mother tends to be very blunt. I mean, my God, my family is extremely cutting. And I've been known to be blunt to friends, but this was different. This was something that was bothering me.
And to be
because
fair,
I was worried
you
about
said,
her.
I love you, but you're fat and you're obese, and I've known you forever, and I've never been able to be honest with you, and if you had cancer, I would tell you that. And so you told her that, and what happened next?
Well, I think we should probably have Diane come up and help tell the story, because I'd like to sort of have her tell what she heard. For me,
She's already told us.
it was... For me, it was a frustration about sort of expressing where I was coming from, but also being very worried about her personal health.
So before she comes up, what did you two find out after the back and forth went on? What did you two find out that you actually had in common, that you had a lot more in common than either of you two would have ever believed when it came to food?
We discovered that we both had an incredibly unhealthy relationship with food, and one that practically paralleled itself, except in the way we turned out physically. She ended up on one side of the physical spectrum, I ended up on the other, but how we got there was surprisingly similar.
And you all were both absolutely obsessed with food. You thought about it 24 hours a day. She thought about it 24 hours a day.
The wrong food, and self-loathing about afterward eating it. So it was a terrible cycle that ended her where she was and put me where I was, which was hungry all the time, kind of exhausted all the time beyond the schedule that I worked, and also feeling a little bit imbalanced mentally
And you
about
may-
who I was as a person.
I feel that way too.
Yes, but that's
and
different. That's a
you
reality.
actually made a deal with her on that boat, right?
Yes, we did. We decided that we would fight this together. And she was saying, you've got to write a book about this. People don't know this about you. People think that you're the food police. And you need to write this side of the story. And I wanted to, but I also wanted to figure out how to help a friend. And so I issued a challenge to Diane. Diane is an Emmy Award-winning journalist, and she's been well-known in Connecticut for decades for her incredible work. And her stories and her storytelling, her radio talk show hosting, her writing, her television presentation on CPTV, on Channel 8, basically expressing the beauty of the state and symbolizing, almost being an ambassador to Connecticut. She is, to me, a journalist's journalist, unlike us, by the way.
We just kind of make it up.
Who did all the work.
I mean,
and you know, I didn't understand why this incredibly brilliant, accomplished woman had found herself in this trouble and couldn't talk about it. And so we set out on this book together. We'll talk about the challenge to try and figure out how we could get back to the road to health.
One final thing is, you were writing this book, and Diane was doing so much great research on it, and you guys were sharing so much about it. You all also found out something about, but you were talking to Christie, and you all both were talking to Nora Ephron, Susie Essman, Jennifer Hudson, all of these people, these public figures. And you started to realize with the research that if somebody starts gaining weight, that society's view of them as being undisciplined often is just not accurate. That, in fact, the odds are stacked against them once they gain weight, ever losing weight. Why is that? What did the science, what science did you find out?
Working on this book together, well, there's first of all sort of social science and data that shows that people who are obese are completely discriminated against. And by the way, we judge them too in our heads. And it's amazing that we won't talk to our friends about this, but we think a certain thing about them. And the data that we dug up shows that people get paid less, they get jobs, they get less job opportunities than those who look, quote, fit, like I did. And that also affects the way we think of people who are suffering from weight issues, and then the way they think of themselves because they feel it. It's a terrible emotional cycle that I think plays into their success in life. But we also found that in many ways, as you put it, everything is stacked against us when we struggle with our weight because the food is engineered to be, quite frankly, addictive. You can't, and I use that word so carefully because when we set out to write this book, people thought I was crazy. But now the science is catching up, and there have been some other books that you'll see out there, Salt, Sugar, and Fat by Michael Moss, to name one of them, that is showing that the food is pretty much engineered to make sure you want more and to make sure that there is almost a reward center of your brain that lights up when you eat it. And then think about this when you go to the grocery store. Try and buy one really healthy meal applicable to this science. You might find one if you spend a lot of money and you search and you really read labels. How about two? How about a whole week's worth of meals? How about the snacks for during the day? How about breakfast as well? It's almost impossible because the food is laced with salt, sugar, and fat to an extent that it's unhealthy to have, more than like a tiny piece of something, which you don't do. Portions, the fact that we don't move. People who struggle with their weight have no support by the community and the society and food businesses and beverage businesses. It's rough out there, and I think it's a crisis that's going to undermine our country's strength.
With that, let's bring up Diane. And Diane, you have... Stage left. How did you feel when Mika approached you on the boat and decided to talk about your weight?
I have to say that I sort of brought it on myself a little bit by accident by saying to her, having the family up for the weekend, and I said, I don't know what to cook because I watch you on Morning Joe every day and you're always talking about what people should eat and not eat, and you're the food police, and I don't know what to make when you come. I'm so self-conscious.
She makes me self-conscious just being here. I mean, being on the set, I eat 5, 6, 7 munchkins and suddenly the sirens go off.
Well, exactly. So I sort of opened up the conversation inadvertently, and that's when she said to me, but don't you know, I talk about it all the time because I can't resist that food. I'm obsessed with it. I'm thinking about it all the time. Even when we're on the show, I'm thinking about food. They bring out Crystal Burgers, and she thinks, I better not eat one because if I take a bite, I'm going to scarf up every one on the table.
Like an alcoholic.
Exactly. So when she said that, I thought, this is a side of Mika that I never knew in 15 years. And then she turned to me and she said, and by the way, who do you think I'm talking to? I'm talking to you because you're fat. You're obese. And she said, your weight is going to kill you. and I don't want that to happen because I love you and I need you and my girls need you. And so you have to lose weight. It felt like a punch in the mouth at first. But then when her eyes filled up with tears and she said, I love you and I want you to be here for me, how could you resist that? How could you take that?
And so what deal did you guys make at that point?
Well, by the time we got off the boat, I said to Mika, I think you ought to write a book about this because I think when you talk about it on Morning Joe, people think, what does she know about food? Look at her. Please, don't tell me what to eat. So I said, I really think you ought to write a book.
That's what I tell her, by the way.
Yeah, I know. She and for good reason. And a couple of weeks later, she called me. I was driving, and she said, I think we have a deal to write a book. And I said, what do you mean we have a deal to write a book? I'm not writing a book. And she said, yeah, you are. She said, we're going to work on a book together about our journeys with our weight, and I'm going to be able to talk about all the things I want to talk about on Morning Joe, about obesity and the crisis in this country and why it's going to bankrupt us and what we need to do about it. But in order to do that, we have to tell our own stories, and we have to tell them honestly.
What surprised you? Because, I think you were probably like me and probably like a lot of people in this audience, because Mika would always, Willie and I would be around and would be eating like 12 hamburgers and doing all this stuff, and then Mika would start saying, don't do that, I've got problems with food, and we kind of roll our eyes. It wasn't until she started writing this book that I found out some things about her and about this obsession and this really unhealthy relationship with food that she had that I just didn't believe. What surprised you the most about what you found out about her
know that she was going to, when she was away at college, that she was going away on Saturday night, sneaking away from her dorm and driving to the all-night Price Chopper to fill up a cart with junk food and go home and scarf it all down and then punish herself the next day by running 10 miles and not eating for the rest of the week. Literally living on water and lettuce.
You said at the same time she was doing that at college, you were doing that up at Hartford. That's how you...
Yeah,
or Syracuse, that would how you'd spend Saturday nights.
I was in upstate New York, and I was by myself. I had lost my boyfriend that I had gone to high school and college with. He'd been killed in an accident, and I was all by myself, and I found there's an all-night Price Chopper, and they have these really good cookies and ice cream and chips and all that stuff, and it's really comforting to take it home all by yourself and eat it. Only it's not comforting the next day when you wake up and realize what you've done to yourself.
So the more you all talked, the more you realized that you had a lot in common. But what's so fascinating is it actually, everybody would expect you're part of the deal with Diane, which was lose 75 pounds. She's gone beyond that. But there was another side of the deal, which was old bag of bones had to gain some weight. Is that what you called her?
Apparently.
Yeah.
I mean, Mika didn't think she had a problem. She knew she had problems in the past. She knew she had this obsession, but she thought she had her weight pretty well under control and her eating pretty well under control. And the more we talked while we started doing the research for the book, the more we talked, the more I said to her, you have a problem. You eat 5 things, and that's all you'll eat. Your diet is so regimented and so restricted because you're afraid to eat anything, and that's no way to live. That's no way to live.
Again, equally obsessed,
Yeah.
and I will
You're
tell
gonna
you.
talk about me.
And I'm sure she drove me crazy. I'm sure she drove you crazy. I'm sure she drove Jim crazy. I'm sure she drove the kids
Jim
crazy.
called me Jethro.
What do you mean he called you Jethro?
Well, because I get a salad bowl out and I would pour in Captain Crunch, and I would
Nothing wrong
eat-
with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He was like, "Really, Jethro?"
Nothing wrong with
'Cause I'd
that.
eat the whole salad bowl of Captain Crunch.
So your deal was from Diane gain weight. You were at 118.
Yeah.
You were miserable. I got to say, there were a couple of times I was shocked, because she did say a couple of years, oh, you have this problem with eating. And I'm like, shut up. And so we were in not Fort Myers.
Fort Worth.
Fort
Texas.
Worth. There you go. Thank you. We're in Fort Worth, Texas at Bob Schieffer Symposium. And we left the symposium, and as is usually the case, we, get up at 4 in the morning, and we do events at night. We're out till 10 at night. We're out at this time. I think there were thousands of people there. We were exhausted. And about Lewis and, were you there, Lauren? Okay, so Lewis and, Madeline Peters and a couple other people were in the car, and we heard this in the back seat, in the back of the SUV. And Lewis goes, what the hell is that? And he turns on the light. And Mika's in the back of this SUV. And Schieffer's people had been nice enough to give us this huge tin pan, a container of like 20 enchiladas. And I promise you, Mika had eaten probably 10 of them in about 2 minutes. The light was on. She had it all over her face and all over her outfit. And she really, and I'm dead serious, she didn't really even know what she was doing. This happened in Orange County when we were traveling across the country, exhausted. This is the first time I realized that she didn't just want to eat like leaves and nuts. And they had put this plate in front of us, and I looked at it and I said, "Damn, that's so bad. I'm not even going to eat that."
Okay, so
And like 3 minutes later, I turn and a guy's talking to me. Yeah, that's great. No, I swear I said it to Newt. I turn around, and the plate's, is licked clean. And Chris licked, and I said, "Oh my God, she does like food." But I bring that up for a point. When you were sitting at 118, it's like you wouldn't eat, then you would explode. We could tell the Nutella story. But you've adjusted because Diane told you had to be part of this deal too. What was your part of the deal?
well, because I was starving all the time, and that's why those things would happen. And quite frankly, in the book, and I'm regretting writing it right now, but in the book, I discovered, because we talked to a lot of women about sort of their relationship with food, and the more we talked to people, the more I realized I'm definitely not the only one who behaves extremely with food, who eats the icing, only the icing off the cake, thinking somehow that has less fat, or some weird quirk about the way we eat food at work. Or Gail King, for example, who has fantastic stories. I thought I was the only one who ordered room service and ordered all this food, and then they'd say, "For how many?" And I'd say, 2. And Gail said she would do that, and then the food would come like this big thing, and the guy would knock on the door, and she'd turn the shower on, close the door, and be like, "Come on in. Honey, the food's here." And she also talks about watching a commercial for what was it?
McRib special
The
at
McRibs
McDonald's.
at McDonald's, and she saw the commercial. It was raining out. I think it was nighttime. And she drove to McDonald's
in her pajamas and rain boots.
because it was a limited edition. And so there's something in not just the marketing, but in the food.
It sounds pretty damn logical to me. I don't know.
The salt, the sugar, and the fat, and sort of the way it hooks your brain. It's not just that we're undisciplined. There's something else when you eat it that you get fairly hooked on it. And there was actually some studies that we looked at that showed that the pleasure center in the brain would light up the same way it does to cocaine. That this whole addiction thing is not just a crazy notion to give us an excuse to behave badly, but maybe that there's something else in there that says, you know what, it's not just that obese people are undisciplined. I don't think Christie is an undisciplined person. I don't think Diane Smith is undisciplined. I think there's something else going on, and we set out to really look at that, to look at our behaviors, lay them out on the table, be honest about it, talk to other people about what they do, and let's have, as a result, a real conversation where we have a real chance at being healthy. For me, it's calling myself out on this, because I am really tired of being hungry. And really tired of being 118 pounds.
I'm going to ask you for the 18th time.
Yes.
You were 118 pounds, and the deal was you would gain weight.
Right.
So what do you weigh now?
Oh, I weigh about 135.
Yeah. How do you feel?
Thank you.
How do you feel?
It's all right. It's fine.
No. You said something that's very interesting. So Mika, and it's every woman on TV, it seems, they have to obsess about everything, about eating and what dress they wear and everything else. Whereas Chris Lick called me up when I lived on the Upper West Side at 5:56.
Oh, this is so unfair. It makes me very angry.
And it's 5:56. Our show starts at 6. I'm going. The phone rings. Hello. He's like, "Dude, it's 5:56." I'm like, "Damn!" And I run to the bathroom. I wet my hair. I jump in the car. In a cab, and I'm there, like at 6 o'clock. Hey, good morning. Welcome to the morning show. And I got there in like 4 minutes. If you're a woman, you've got to obsess about everything. You've got to obsess about your hair. We were talking about how it wasn't fair for Hillary. And you have to obsess about your weight. And you talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
But you said something that was really amazing, remarkable to me because I just don't pay attention to it. I'm a guy. But you were looking through some pictures one day, and you said, look at the pictures of me in North Carolina. This is after you were writing the book. At the convention and the sweaters, you said it was the first time you've ever been comfortable on TV because you'd picked up weight and you were wearing a bigger sweater.
And working on it by really seeking therapy and the therapy of writing this book. But I'll tell you, I'm up against, and in our industry, it is really a highlighted version of what happens in the professional world to people who struggle with their weight. And that is that I got the messages from people when I was 118 that was a good thing. Every time I was rail thin, it was, you look great, you look like a model, here's some free $2,000 dresses, please wear them for me. How about you being on this show or that show? And it's not just in my head, that's the competition in the industry that is so overinflated and ridiculously out of whack, distorted really. I mean, if you look at some of the women that have interviewed me for this book are like, I mean, they're emaciated, and that's what I used to be like. And quite frankly, that seemed to open doors. That I seemed to get that message. And if you're skeptical, I'll tell you there is one really, really clear story in the book, and that is when I was trying to get off overnights. And I went over to interview at a major network for a job, and the vice president said to me, you know, I had just had a baby. I was maybe 135, maybe more, but normal looking, okay? And she said to me, you know what, you kind of look like a mess. You just had a baby. You ought to go drink some water, lose 10 pounds, come back in 6 months. And I did, and I came back in 6 months, and I got hired. So that's a pretty clear message as to what you think they want and what they think they want. So yes, I feel comfortable now, but there is a little voice in me saying, I hope I can do this.
Diane,
because the message is very clear.
And Diane, the real problem is actually Mika, when she tells that story, a lot of people go, oh, that's terrible. And Mika says, no, it's not, because they actually warned me in TV news. You all have done studies that if somebody's 10 pounds, a woman's 10 pounds, 15 pounds overweight, they just don't get hired.
Well,
they don't get called back.
That was the really scary thing. We did research with a person who's probably the premium, the primary researcher on weight discrimination and weight bias in the country. She's at Yale. And she told us that the statistics show that women who are overweight don't get jobs. If they do get jobs, they get paid 30% less than their slimmer colleagues. Forget about what the men are getting paid. And it also showed that men get paid less if they are overweight. And it showed that there are people who don't even get a chance to go in the door. We did a conversation with, I know he's friends with the two of you, but it was so painful to me.
Oh, this was early on in the process. Donnie Deutsch, he doesn't say the most appropriate things.
No, definitely not.
Donnie never does.
And we have to tell them about Nora Ephron.
And that's why we call. But tell about Donnie, then we'll
Donnie,
talk about.
we were on the phone, so he didn't see us. But I'm like, me and my girlfriend Diane, we're doing this book. Yeah, how'd that go for you?
So we're asking Donnie, and this is when I weighed 250 pounds, and Donnie didn't see me. We're on the telephone. And Mika said, so, how do you feel about hiring people? You're an ad agency guy, and you're all about marketing and presentation. So how do you feel about people who are overweight? And he said, oh, I would never hire anybody who's fat. I don't want them representing me. That's my company. And then he said, and I'm on the other end going, and Mika's texting me saying, really, he's okay. He's not that bad. And he said, and I said, well, Donnie, what about the fact that, you have a daughter? Would you tell your daughter you better be rail skinny or you're never going to get a job? And he says, no, I tell my daughter no matter how she looks, you're the most beautiful thing in the world. I said, but you wouldn't hire her. He said, well, yeah.
Well, and also he talked about what people think when someone who is overweight walks in the door. And I'm sorry, the data of the people who don't have the guts to put their name on this backs up what Donnie said.
And that's the thing, isn't it, Diane? What's so frightening is that Donnie's just too stupid to lie. I mean,
he's not here to protect
He has no
himself.
training as a politician. So, but that is what's frightening. So Donnie tells you the truth.
He said, somebody walks in my door and they're overweight. I think they're undisciplined. They don't have their act together, so they probably can't do the job for me.
See, that's what people think, and that's what we are setting out to sort of, as we work to solve our problems, our own personal problems with food, to understand what's in the food, to read you. There are different solutions in the book, retraining your taste buds to crave the correct food, but you have to know what the correct food is and how to find it. It's an extremely difficult process, but it can be done if it's done correctly. And there's a lot of people that I think back up the science that we put in there and that we look at, and also personal conversations about relationships with food that you can really connect with. I think that our conversation with Nora was equally as awkward, but poignant in that we lost her a few weeks later. But Nora Ephron and Diane and I spoke, and Diane, I guess how did it start where she said, why do you eat?
She said, why are you so heavy? Why did you gain so much weight? And I started saying, well, I've tried every diet there is. I've been on every diet in the book, and I've, I lose and then I gain, and I lose and I gain. She said, well, what about Weight Watchers? Why didn't you try? I said, well, I did try Weight Watchers. And she said, you tried it. Why did you stop? And I said, oh, I got busy. I couldn't go to the meetings. She said, who said you could stop? If you're an alcoholic, no one says you can stop and you can start drinking. You go to AA. Keep going to Weight Watchers. She said just like that. Keep going.
Nora had this remarkable, Nora Ephron was a good friend of ours, and she had this remarkable relationship with food. And she absolutely loved it. I know, Mika, you and your family went to Paris a few years ago. And so Nora finds out that Mika's going to Paris. And she immediately emails her, here are the 20 best restaurants in Paris, and this is what you should have on it. And yet Nora was real thin, and she had this belief with food. Love great food, but don't waste a calorie. If it's not worth eating, don't eat it, and don't eat the huge portions, right?
Yeah. So lots of people in the book give us great stories like this about what their solution is, because I think every woman especially, and men, especially the ones we talk to, have a different way of getting to healthy. And so, and I think that's what it's going to be for our society.
But healthy is not always thin. You told me 2 of your favorite interviews were of women that nobody would say could be confused with runway models.
Right.
Susie Essman, who is just remarkable. She's on Curb Your Enthusiasm. We love Susie. And she doesn't say the F word every 3 words in this book like she does on Curb to Larry David.
Yep.
And the other one, and the one that you actually said you started tearing up in the interview with, Kathleen Turner, when she said, enough.
Yeah, she was, actually that turned into an interview with me, and she started asking me about how I live and what I eat and what I don't eat. And I hadn't gone to therapy yet, which Diane made me do for the book and for me. And she was like, ugh, your life is so bad. How can you live that way? That's just a tyranny. You've just, how long can you keep that up, Mika? And you know what? Not very long. And so was either going to crash and burn or make some changes.
And the soundbite of the book is when Kathleen Turner said, I have decided I will not live under the effing tyranny of thin. Except she didn't say effing. Let's open it up for questions.
Are you going to be Oprah?
I'm Oprah.
Okay.
Everybody look under your chairs. You got a new car? Yes. Or I can be Phil Donahue.
Oh, that's
good. He lives in Connecticut, right?
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what were the 5 foods before your therapy and everything that you ate? I'm just curious, what was your regime to stay thin, Mika?
Oh, God.
You said there were 5.
Kale. I can tell you because I remember the diet. Cantaloupe smoothies. Kale.
Greek yogurt.
Greek yogurt, plain. And oatmeal for breakfast with flax seeds on top.
Lots of apples.
And 2 apples in the car on the way to work.
Salad at night.
I think I'm going to throw up.
Occasionally a sweet potato.
Also, Mika did this
Broccoli
blog.
Rob.
Mika did this blog for New York Magazine.
That didn't go well.
And they said, what do you eat? And I think for the day that went up on New York Magazine's online thing, I think Mika may have been the most hated woman in the tri-state area. Because if you want to see how a sick diet, just look at that one, right?
I got some bad comments.
You get so bad. That is an understatement. I live in her house now.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. About 2 months ago, the New York Times had an article about the food industry, and I was very much impressed by how they really do behavioral studies to figure out what you want to eat and how they can addict you. So it's a very interesting point, and thank you for bringing that up.
That was an excerpt from Michael Moss's book, Salt, Sugar, and Fat. And Mika has interviewed Michael a couple of times on the show. And he can tell you they know how many pounds of pressure per square inch it will take to make you eat a chip and want another one. And they know it that precisely. They know how much sugar load they need to put in the food in order to make you come back for more and more. And Mika talks a lot about soda and how dangerous she thinks soda is. And, you know, Coca-Cola is not just trying to get you to drink more Coke. They're trying to get you to drink more Coke than any other beverage there is, including water. And the people who drink a lot of Coke, they don't call them loyal Coke drinkers. They call them, tell me if this sounds like addiction to you, they call them heavy users, okay?
This guy right here, right? Twitter is the worst thing that's ever been invented, right? The most hateful people in the world are on Twitter. I'm sorry, I am as well. But people are so mean. But somebody like a couple of weeks ago said, it was the first intelligent thing I've read on Twitter in like a couple of years. Somebody said, I get the feeling Joe is being deliberately obtuse when it comes to obesity. And I kind of am, to make a point and play something off of there. But what has shocked me by what Mika has taught me and what Diane's taught me is that, you know, that old Lay's commercial, you can't eat just one? They pay engineers millions of dollars to figure out how to make sure that people like me can't eat just one. It's unbelievable. So somebody raised their hand. Yep.
So when I listen to industry, when we talk about obesity or eating problems, they're always talking about personal responsibility. And that bugs the heck out of me based on the things that you're talking about, Michael Moss's book, and a lot of the marketing and advertising, which, let's face it, is 24/7. It focuses on kids. I mean, Coca-Cola markets to kids. I was looking, speaking of Twitter, I was looking at someone's Twitter feed, and they posted a photo of how Coca-Cola and McDonald's, they market in preschools.
Yep.
You know, to teach children, you know, how to recognize letters. They'll give people, you know, Coca-Cola and McDonald's letters. So my question is, based on what I just said, shouldn't we be regulating the food industry?
Well, I think so, but Joe would not agree. You may not talk, Joe. So here's the thing. First of all, McDonald's...
I warned them. I said, first they're going to come after your cigarettes, and then they're going to come after your Big Macs, right?
Right.
And it's happening.
Right. I will say, and this
And
will
guns.
make... This will
Yes.
actually make you at least be a little bit relieved, Joe. I will say Coke, McDonald's, and a lot of these major food and beverage industries are correcting a bit. You know, McDonald's has a lot of sets of restaurants now that are owned by the same company that are not so unhealthy. You go to a McDonald's, and it's not the McDonald's that I went to at 17 years old and dreamed about all day until I actually got there and had a Big Mac sitting in front of me, one that I was biting into and a large fries. But they have a lot of other options. And I think the correction is happening. Personally, I sometimes accuse them of getting ready for litigation, but I think the market is changing because of the very conversation we're having. In terms of personal responsibility, I applaud what Mayor Michael Bloomberg has done and what he's tried to do, because if anything, it's gotten the conversation going as well, and someone needs to give me a better idea before they criticize him, because as Diane, I'll let you pick up on this, it's not like the government doesn't already completely control the food we eat.
Well, it's true. And when people say, I don't want the government in my kitchen, then I say to them, how about telling the government to stop subsidizing corn so that it is so cheap that food companies, who obviously their object is to sell as much food and make as much money as they can, are using corn as their sweetener because it is so incredibly cheap that there's nothing else that can compete with it, and they use it as a sugar not just to sweeten products, but also to improve what they call the mouthfeel and the bliss point and how long it'll last on the shelf and the thickness of the food. So that, do you know that when you buy canned pasta sauce or pasta sauce in a jar, that the second ingredient after tomatoes is sugar? Do you know that some of the sweetened cereals that your kids are eating have a 70% sugar content?
So, awkward moment of the first book event in Washington. I'm like railing about the government and the control over food and, you know, what our children are fed in school lunches, and I'm on my soapbox. And they're like, Mika, Joe, the Secretary of Agriculture is here. And I'm like, really, Secretary Vilsack, why don't you come on up here and talk about what our children are eating? And he comes up and he's like,
This is what I actually didn't come here to talk. I was an orphan, Mika, and I had an eating disorder and was shamed for 35 years.
because I was obsessed with
It was
food.
awful. It was we had called this guy. He wanted to be in the back of the bookstore, and Mika might as well have been her crazy Czechoslovakian mother. Come up here, Secretary Vilsack.
It was very awkward.
Diane, congratulations on your weight loss. You look great. How did you do it, and how are you able to maintain it?
Well, one of the things that Mika said to me when she suggested that we write the book together, she said, I want you to take what you're going to get paid for writing the book and spend that on losing weight, whatever it takes. Use it to go to a nutritionist, whatever it is, if you need bariatric surgery, what have you. And she said, but that's how you need to do it. And so I took her up on that, and part of it was allowing myself to not be running across the state every other day to go to events all over the place, but to have time to spend on myself, to go to the gym. I hired a trainer. I went to a hospital-based outpatient weight loss program. And the trainer, when I first walked in the door at over 250 pounds and really in bad shape, I had a bad hip, my feet were bad, my knees were bad, I was in terrible condition, I had terrible balance. I walked in the door and I kind of unloaded all of this on him, which was really unusual because the two of us, if you saw the two of us, you would never imagine that we would have any kind of rapport just to look at us. He is African, now an American, but he was a child soldier kidnapped in Ghana who was pressed into being a child soldier from the time he was 6. He was carrying an AK-47. He escaped when he was 13 and came to America. And he didn't know how to read or write when he got here. He went to school, learned how to read and write, and eventually opened his own business as a personal trainer. I tell you that background because he looked at me, and I started to cry when I told him how miserable I felt about all of this and how unsuccessful I had been over the last 15 years or 10 years in losing weight. And he looked at me, and he said to me, lay that burden down. That's my burden to carry now. Just show up. And that's what I did. I showed up 3, 4, 5 times a week, and he showed me things that I could do and helped me get to the point where I could have hip surgery and recover from it. And then I went to a nutrition program at a hospital that taught me from scratch how to eat again. And now I'm eating more the way Michael Pollan tells you to eat. A lot less and mostly plants. I eat about 5 times a day. I eat a little bit of protein at every meal. I eat a lot more vegetables. And even after losing only 10 pounds, when I had so much to lose, after losing 10 pounds, they took me off high blood pressure medication. After 20 pounds, I'm off my cholesterol medication. I'm not getting injections in my knees anymore. My feet feel okay, except when Mika makes me wear these shoes that I hate. And I'm working out, and I'm able to be active again. But the main thing is I relearned how to eat and started eating from scratch, mostly unprocessed foods, almost entirely unprocessed foods.
That's an amazing story, and what an amazing line. Lay that burden down. That's really moving. I got to say, I also hate it when Mika makes me wear high heels on set.
Hi, my name is Dale, and I bought your book last night, got a head start on it. I'm interested in asking a little bit about the spiritual aspects of recovery from food addiction from your point of view. I was struck by something in the introduction. We have to create a personal game plan that guides us on how to eat and on how to live. And we have to understand how that will help us love ourselves first so that we're able to really love others. Question I have is a little bit about the cart and the horse.
Yeah.
I've been working in mental health and addictions treatment since 1987, in recovery from food addiction and morbid obesity since 1981.
Wow.
And my question is, which is the cart and which is the horse? I've come to feel that I need to learn how to practice unconditionally loving myself first.
Right.
Will empower me to eat right and live right. It's not that doing that will conditionally allow me to feel good about myself.
Well, all I can do is speak about my experience that I wrote about, and I think, again, everybody comes to a healthy place, especially mentally, their own way. But I will say, I was horrified and embarrassed, especially in front of my family, to write my sort of history and the behavior that I experienced or I put myself through over the past 30 years. And the thing that really broke my heart the most is that I have an incredible family. I grew up in an incredible family, and I have an incredible family now. And a lot of the time that I was worrying about whether or not I would, have extra inches around my waist if I ate a certain thing, and I think about the next meal or what I could do maybe to go get some Hostess cupcakes at the bodega and only eat the tops and throw away the bottoms, and how I do that without anyone seeing. It's strange behavior, but it ruled my brain. I mean, I can't imagine what I could have done if I hadn't wasted so much time. But the thing that broke my heart the most was that there were so many joyful moments that I should have been fully experiencing. And instead, I was sort of consumed, excuse the pun, by something else.
Talk about the track meet with Carly.
Oh,
I mean, with Amelia.
Exactly. A beautiful night. My daughter's at a track meet. There's music playing. There's hot dogs on a grill somewhere. People are paying for those. The kids are getting ready at the starting line. And I'm thinking about the hot dogs and squeezing my back and thinking, God, I really want one, but I probably shouldn't, because that's, it's just a ridiculous math that you do in your mind instead of being in the moment. And it's embarrassing for me, but I want to stop, and I think we have to talk about it. I don't think I'm alone.
And also, it's so fascinating. You talk about people have to love themselves unconditionally first, practice loving themselves, fake it till they make it, right? I do that every day. That's, though, what you guys both, when we're talking about at the beginning of the book, and you look at both of you, and it looks like you all have nothing in common. In fact, you talk to each other, and you find you have a lot of things in common. Diane, at the top of that list has to be the fact that neither of you loved yourself or even could practice loving yourself because of this obsession with food that drove her to think about it nonstop and hate herself when she ate a little here or there and consumed you as well, right?
And what I learned when we worked on this was that the reason I hated myself was I thought, why don't I have the willpower to do this? What's wrong with me? Why do all these people around me have the willpower and the discipline to be able to live a healthy life and be thin and whatever? And I thought, why can't I do that? And it was in learning all this that we learned about food and about how obesity works and the many different things that are going on that made me realize it wasn't a lack of willpower. There was a lot more happening. It wasn't just my failure. And believe me, I take responsibility for everything I ate. I put all those things in my mouth. The food companies did not hold my mouth open and shove it down my throat. I ate it. So I take responsibility for that. But man, they don't make it easy, and neither does society when they bombard you 24/7.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. First, I just want to say you're very brave to write this book. It's not easy to talk about weight and feelings about food and food attitudes. I I work with children. I'm a child nutritionist, and I've worked with children for over 20 years. And one of the things that concerns me is that society really does hinge on getting food right. That if we just make sure we get all the food right in a child's diet, that they will be cured or prevented from being overweight or having problems with obesity. But what we know from the research is that actually parent feeding styles and parent knowledge and child development, all of those things factor into how well a child eats or not. And so I'm curious as to what your take would be, on how your own children have sort of grown up with a restrictive eater and an overeater, and how that's impacted them, and also your take on how we handle childhood obesity in our country.
Well, we have a house full of really healthy food, and we have one child that loves soda pop and another that would never order it to save her life. So we have 2 teen girls. It's a mystery.
And by the way, Jim is a really
Very
Jim's-
athletic.
You're too healthy, Jim.
Yeah, they're very
You got to
bored
write
with
the
food
next book.
that we
He runs marathons.
Oh, my Lord.
He eats perfectly.
Looks like a 30-year-old.
Unbelievably healthy.
Not fair.
He's a real journalist too. I'm tired of being
Exactly.
surrounded by real journalists. As I said before, he sneezes and like Emmys fall out of
But
his
we
ear.
actually,
But you all both though are really, really healthy.
Yeah, and at this point, I've had the conversation about this book with my daughter so that they understand where I'm coming from, so they understand their mother has struggled. Because I think kids know stuff already, so it's better to be honest. Having said that, we do a whole chapter, like a graphic, on what to say, what not to say, and what when you say something, what they're actually hearing. Because talking to girls, teenage girls, when you're trying to raise them is a mystery enough in itself. And I don't know how many times you guys have heard, don't say that to her, she'll get an eating disorder, or don't say that to her,
So
she'll
what
get
do you
that.
say if you walk in and Carly is eating this big pile of chocolate like ice cream, and she's just shoveling it into her mouth? What do you tell her?
You know what?
What's the right
if
thing
you
to tell
see
her?
if you see a child doing that 3 or 4 times in a row, and you're seeing a pattern that concerns you, here's what I learned, because it's almost impossible to find the right words. And sometimes you do have to seek help and find someone else. I talk to a therapist about how do I, from my perspective, with the problems I've had, talk to my children, and with the unrealistic, by the way, example I've set for a while. So mine's a very unusual situation or specific situation. But what I learned, what I think the most valuable takeaway in this section is, when you see something like that happening in a form of a pattern, don't say something in the moment. One thing my mother always did was say, "Oh, you're so undisciplined, you have to stop that," right then and there. And so you start attributing that guilt and self-loathing with the moment of what you're eating and the words you're hearing, which she's trying to help. She doesn't want a pattern to continue, but it does actually dig it right in. If you see a pattern, wait till another moment. If it's worth talking about, you'll find better words and you'll actually remember to talk about it. So wait, and then say, "I've noticed ... What do you think is behind that?" Or, "I'm seeing this ... How can I help you think of a better option?" And you'll find that there are other reasons why children do these things or why they behave extremely with food. You need to find out that reason, not impose your own fears on your child, which usually happens in the moment.
And the most important thing that we found out from Dr. Nancy Snyderman and Dr. Emily Sine and a number of other people that contributed to the book is that what parents are doing and what they're modeling is what's most important to the kids. As with anything in parenting, it's not so much what you say, it's what you do. They're observing everything you do. And what they all recommended is have the conversation. Take your kids food shopping. Have your kids cook with you. Sit down to family dinners. We need to get back to family dinner and not have every kid eating whatever they're grabbing out of the refrigerator on their way to lacrosse practice or on the way back from band practice or on their way out for a study, whatever. That you really need to sit down and start cooking again and having family meals where people learn what's appropriate to eat and where families eat together in an appropriate way.
So you say that the parents make the example then, that we set the example. Uh-oh.
Maybe
All right,
one more, Joe.
one
and
more,
then
and we'll leave it with
sign.
you. You're going to make a lot of book buyers angry. You're taking the last question. Do you want to take that?
Were you, sur- were you, s- were you surprised surprised when Christie got a bariatric
No.
thing? And why can't he do what Diane did?
Well, Diane did. Is it fair to say is the last step medically before you take the step towards surgery? Diane did something I think that was so difficult that I can't even. I don't know how you did it because at a couple weeks ago you were at 75 pounds. This woman had to help me write about food 24 hours a day, got a hip replacement, and had to lose 75 pounds. Like, I know I fell off the wagon a few times working on this book, Nutella.
You got to tell the story with
no,
Jim
that's okay.
here.
It's in the book. It's really good.
So she took Ambien,
Lord.
which she calls the truth serum.
Yeah.
And she stumbled down at about 11 o'clock at night.
Is Jim here? Jim? Okay, no, he stepped down.
He stepped out
because
for
he
the story.
witnessed
Was
this.
coming, yeah.
He witnessed this. He knew this was coming, wanted to be gone. And so Mika comes down, and she's like in this Ambien state. And with Jim, like right there, she just takes out the Nutella, puts it in front of her, takes and starts eating with a spoon. And then in this altered
yogurt.
state, she finds out that she can't get enough. So she starts digging her hands in and starts eating it. She wakes up the next morning, and she has
Covered in Nutella.
Nutella up to her elbows.
Anyhow.
And she goes downstairs, and Jim's like, what was that about?
We digress.
What
really.
was that about?
That would be a bad moment. I forget the point I was making, but what's that?
Chris
Christie. Look, I think I'm really happy for him. I've talked to him a lot about his condition. And I mean, one of the first conversations I had with him, because we connected so quickly, was you've got a great political career. People really like you. Your approval rating is doing this. It's amazing what you've been able to do in New Jersey. So how are we gonna lose this weight? And
First time she met him.
First time she met him.
Took us
So-
15
By the way,
years.
Governor, you're a great guy, but you're fat.
You know what? I will tell you,
We
Chris,
really were kind of being nice to John Corzine on the campaign trail, right? So Christie wins. Nobody expects him to win. He comes in, and I lean over and I whisper to Mika, I said, okay, we were kind of rough on him. Let's be real nice, okay? So he'll come back. And so she goes, congratulations, Governor. How you going to lose weight now? On TV.
So, but
How did that work
actually,
out?
he responded. I knew he would. I could just tell he responded really well, and we've had really open conversations about it. And the surgery doesn't surprise me at all. And I truly think he is saving his life.
He couldn't do what Diane did.
He tried.
He tried.
He didn't. He had a nutritionist in his house. He had a trainer. He was and by the way, he is running the state of New Jersey. This isn't some guy who's, just sitting back and watching television and just, doesn't feel like it. He really tried. And he could not lose a pound. When you become that morbidly obese, there's not a lot of turning back.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, there's no turning back.
And the schedule is unbelievable, right? And that's one of the things that, you talked about how you had to get off the road. You had to focus more. I mean, how many people in here have gotten on diets and you're starting to do well and you're starting to make progress, and then you have one trip after another trip after another trip? I mean, that really is, Diane, that's a killer, isn't it?
Well, that was one of the things that working with Mika enabled me to be able to stop doing, which was running all over the state of Connecticut every day, because my lifestyle meant that I was getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I was driving from Norwalk to Hartford to do a radio show. Then I had a television show that I would tape in the afternoons. And then at night I would go out to either MC events for charities or to go out and give talks. And I was on the road all the time. So there was never any time not only to go to the gym, but there was never any time to pack or eat any healthy food, which is why I was at the drive-in all the time. And that's when the weight problems really got going in the last 10 years, when I was too busy to ever have a real meal. I was always eating off, it's called, what we call in the business, dashboard dining. I was really good at that.
I love dashboard dining.
Well, when Mika, gave me the ability to work with her on the book, it let me get myself off that schedule and work on this and have the time to go to the gym and to prepare foods and to think about what I was eating. And so now that the book is finished, if anybody wants to offer me a job where I can do that, that'd be great.
And you talk about dashboard dining. I was joking about waving. One of the great things about New Canaan is I'm from Northwest Florida, also known as the Redneck Riviera, like L.A., Lower Alabama. We have drive-through everything down there drive through everything. The fact that my hometown, New Canaan, doesn't have like a drive-through McDonald's and a drive-through Starbucks and a drive-through whatever, that's pretty good. Now, I will say they do need to move the Dunkin' Donuts to Wilton, because every morning at 6 a.m. on the weekends, I'm getting my munchkin fix, but I do. But thank you, guys. We're gonna have them sign books upstairs, and I do want to say I absolutely love New Canaan. It's an incredible place, and we really, it's a wonderful home. So thank you guys so much. We'll see you upstairs.